So in this video, I'm going to show you how I generally like to add pressure in sessions, when to add pressure, and then when to take a step back when I feel like things have gone slightly wrong. So I'm going to show you two examples. One is with Izzy and the other is with Ishan. So generally how I like to start sessions always is I'll do underarms from about halfway down the wicket. And this gives me a really good opportunity to look at the player's stance, their grip, their decision making, what shots they can hit, what they can't hit. And I'll look for any sort of technical cues that I potentially want to work on in the session or for future sessions as well. So this is like level 2 almost. Like the base layer is static. This is more decision making, but it's really slow. It's not there's not too much pressure, and it sort of allows the player to be able to make a technical decision and play the ball in a way that's going to help them get a good rep. That's what I'm aiming for most of the time from these underarms, is getting lots of volume and reps in with specifically the front foot shots. So as you can see here with Izzy, she's sort of nailing every single shot with these underarms. So I noticed something here with Izzy in particular where she's struggling with that like fourth stump and off stump line, where things just outside of that line would go nicely to cover point if it was a bit wider. Things on middle and leg would go towards like mid on and mid wicket. Things on leg would go to the leg side quite nicely, but anything like on off stump, she would drag across her body. So that generally means that there's something going wrong within the technique. So after we had a quick discussion about it here, I just showed her exactly what I was seeing. Then I went into a more targeted approach here with the underarms. And then sort of with the underarms here, I would go off stump, and then I like to throw in the odd wider one or the one that goes down leg, just to make sure that they're not premeditating or moving too early, because if they're doing that, they're not going to be getting good reps. They need to make the decision when they see the line and the length. Even with these aren't static drills. So I noticed that she did a couple shots there, although they were quite nicely played, they were sort of pulled across the body. So what I did was if the verbal cue didn't work with what I was looking for and what I was expecting, would go into a more static or constraints approach of the session. So this is where I either get them in the position or go and talk about it a bit more, and then I'll set up a drill that they're going to be executing for until I feel like they're ready to progress back to underarms. So in this drill here, I was just making sure Izzy was getting onto that front foot, nice head over the ball. So anything on off stump she can hit nice and straight, and that's what we were working on here, just transferring that weight forward onto the off stump. And then we talked about the toe position and the position of the weight distribution on her front foot. If we think about the top half of our foot and our big toe, we want to make a triangle. And that's what I was explaining here in the video. And then we carried on with the drill, making sure that she was getting all her weight forward on that off stump line, making sure she hit it nice and straight and didn't drag anything to the leg side. So in this next drill, we looked at a more of a decision-making approach to the static drill. So here, I would feed the ball on off stump or on middle and leg or leg, and she would have to make the decision where she would go straight to mid on or to mid wicket based on where the ball bounced. So although it's static, she's got 3 options, and I was waiting for her to make the right decision more often than not. And also looking for her to get onto the front foot, pushing her weight forward so that she's getting onto that top half of the front foot like we spoke about earlier. So when I was satisfied with the amount of reps that she got and she was executing the drill correctly and she was hitting the shot in the right place more often than not, we then progressed back to underarms. This is where I'm more targeted with my feeds. I'll be on off stump, middle stump and leg stump almost every single ball, making sure that she's not dragging the ball across to the leg side. And when it is on off stump or just outside off stump, she's playing the ball nice and straight, or at least she's trying to, and she's getting into the right positions to play the ball. If she inside edges it, obviously it's, that's something that happens. So that's a really good example of where I've noticed a technical breakdown, and we've reverted to a more static drill. So we'll go to like a level 1 pressure where it's really static. You can only sort of execute it in one way. And if you can't execute it at that level, you need to think about your technical progression anyway. So lots of good quality high reps is required at that static level. So after a little while of underarms, and I was satisfied again with how often she was hitting the ball in the right places, we'd then look to progress. And this I do in most sessions. So I'll progress to a kneeling overarm throw. So this will be slightly quicker. The ball will be a little bit more bouncy. They have to make the decision on line and length a little bit quicker here. So it just adds a little bit more pressure. More often than not, it will still be on the front foot. And here what I'll do is I'll just do a mixture of all the shots, but with a higher volume on the ones that we'd been working on previously. So if we're working on off stump line, I'd throw off stump, and then I'd look at making sure I go outside off stump and down the legs. So they're still making good decisions in the session. And if I wanted to take this a step further, if the player is really comfortable with overarm throws when I'm kneeling, I'll go to standing overarm throw. And this is where it'll be more match-like, more match situational. I will potentially use tennis balls here if the player wants to work on more reflex training, or if they're a bit more worried about being hit by the ball if it's short. I will come further back, so it won't be halfway down the wicket. It'll be closer to like 18 yards from the batter. So that's the first example of when I start at level 2, I regress because I noticed a technical fault, work on the technical fault, and then we progress through the pressure stages. Obviously, each stage takes a different amount of time for every player, so it's important that you work through the stages in your own time and your player's own time. You can't rush these. So the next example is with Ishan. I was doing kneeling overarm throws. So the first part of the session, he was executing the shots really, really well with underarms, and I wanted to progress to overarm throwing from a kneeling position. So we did that. And then as you can see from the video here, he sort of struggles to pick up the line and the length as the ball gets a little bit quicker. So I threw a couple more just to see if he would adjust to it, and he really struggled with this. So I think all the technical cues we worked on previously here were probably just clouding his judgment a little bit. So I decided to pull back a long way. So I'd go from like level 3 from kneeling throw to like a level 1, and we would go more static, but close range static. So it's not like he's moving or anything. He's still having to make a decision on the line the ball is going to be on, because we're working on that leg stump line. But the ball is so slow, it just really gives him a chance to work on the technical bits that we spoke about earlier in the session, which was making sure that he pushes his leg towards the ball, opens the front foot, and gets his head really far over his front foot and outside of the line of the pad, and then playing the ball underneath his head so he has a bit more control. So that was the aim of the session here, and what we were trying to make sure that he was doing is playing the ball through his body line to make sure the bat swings through the line of the ball for as long as possible. So this is example 2. So where we build up to like a level 2 situation, and then something happens and it just doesn't look right, and instead of carrying on with trying to force the session, you just don't get anything from it at this point. It's not worth keeping going. We just make sure that we regress, make sure that we are still working on the technical fundamentals, and progress through the drills, and then we try again in the next session once they've had a bit of time to consume the information and think about it and work on it themselves in between sessions. So that's a couple of examples of when I've pushed clients with either going from level 2 to 3, so underarms to overarm throwing, or regressed from overarms to underarms to then more static based drills. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how you could do that with your kid or with players that you're coaching. And let me know if this was really helpful. If you wanted a bit more of a breakdown of this, let me know as well. I hope you found this helpful. Cheers.